This happened last fall when I was staying in a small town in northern Pennsylvania for work. I do commercial refrigeration repair, and at the time I was driving to different grocery stores and restaurants in smaller towns because our company was short on people. The town I was sent to was the kind of place where everything shut down early and there were more empty buildings than open ones. I was supposed to be there for 3 nights while I worked on the walk-in freezers at an older family-owned supermarket. My company booked me a motel on the edge of town because it was the only place nearby with vacancy. I got there a little after 7 p.m. on a Thursday. The motel was one of those single-floor places where all the room doors faced the parking lot. It had maybe 12 rooms total and only 4 or 5 cars in the lot. The office smelled like old coffee and bleach. The woman at the desk was probably in her 60s. She was friendly, but there was something distracted about her. She kept glancing past me toward the parking lot while I was checking in. When she handed me the key, she told me if anyone knocked on my door at night not to answer it unless it was her or the owner. And she said if I heard anything weird outside to call the office and not get involved. She said it in a casual voice like it was normal advice, but it caught me off guard. I asked if that was because the area was bad, and she just said there were some drifters around sometimes and they like to ask guests for money. I remember thinking it was a strange thing to say to someone who had just arrived, but I was tired and didn't really care. My room was near the far end, second to last. Inside, it was clean enough, but it was kind of old. I noticed cigarette burns in the dresser, and the carpet had dark spots. I brought my bag in, grabbed food at the gas station down the road, and came back around 8. While I was walking to my room, I noticed a man sitting in an older dark green pickup truck 2 spaces away from mine. The truck was running, but the headlights were off. I couldn't see his face clearly because of how dark it was, but I remember he didn't look at me like a normal person would when someone walks by. He just sat perfectly still with both hands on the wheel. I assumed he was waiting for someone. I went inside and spent the next hour eating and watching random stuff on my phone. Around 10:30, I took a shower and got into bed. Maybe 20 minutes later, I heard footsteps outside my room. That didn't bother me at first because other people were staying there. Then the footsteps stopped right outside my door. I waited for someone to unlock it or knock on the room next to mine, but nothing happened. After maybe 15 seconds, the steps moved on. A minute later, I heard them again, slowly coming back the other direction and stopping outside my door a second time. Still no knock. Just silence. Then the footsteps walked away again. I got up and looked through the peephole, but I couldn't see anyone. It was probably just someone drunk or confused about which room was theirs. A little after 11, I was half asleep when someone knocked on the door. I stayed still and waited. Then the person knocked again, the same exact way. I got up quietly and looked through the peephole again. There was nobody there. That made my stomach drop a little. The parking lot lights were dim, but the walkway in front of the rooms was empty. I stood there for a while, then locked the deadbolt again, even though it was already locked. I was about to get back into bed when I noticed the curtain near the window had shifted slightly. It wasn't open enough to see out, just enough to make me realize someone might be able to see in from outside, depending on where they stood. I moved it shut and turned off the lamp. I stayed awake another half hour listening. Right around midnight, I heard something that sounded like metal lightly scraping against metal near the door. I got up and stepped as quietly as I could to the door. For the third time, I looked through the peephole. This time I saw movement. Somebody was crouched low, almost underneath the peephole view. I could only see the top of a dark baseball cap and one shoulder. I don't know how long I stood there, but it couldn't have been more than a few seconds before the person stood up and moved away. I heard footsteps going fast toward the end of the building. I called the office right away. The woman who answered sounded annoyed at first until I told her someone had been right outside my door. Then she got quiet and asked if I had opened it, to which I said no. She told me to stay inside and said the owner was going to check outside. About 2 minutes later, I saw headlights sweep across the curtain. Someone drove slowly through the lot and then left. The office called back and said nobody was there now, and it was probably just someone messing around. I asked if I should call the police, and she said it wouldn't do any good unless the person came back. I barely slept after that. Every little sound woke me up. At some point around 3 o'clock in the morning, I did pass out, but I woke up around 5:15 to the sound of my truck door opening alarm. I jumped out of bed and looked through the window without moving the curtain much. There was a man standing at the driver's side of my truck with the door half open. He was tall and wearing a dark jacket and hat. I couldn't see his face because he was turned away from me. Then he looked straight toward my room like he knew I was watching. He shut the truck door and walked off fast toward the road behind the motel. I called 911 this time. The police came about 15 minutes later. They took a report and checked my truck, but they found nothing missing because I never leave anything in it. One officer asked if I was sure I locked it, which made me feel like they already didn't believe me. I knew I locked it. The older officer seemed more interested when I told him about the knocking and the crouching outside my door. He asked the motel owner if they had cameras. They did, but only one in the office and one pointing at the front entrance. Nothing covering my side of the lot. Before the cops left, the older one told me if it happened again not to open my door for any reason and to leave as soon as I could in the morning. I asked if they thought it was random, and he just said probably, but his face didn't really match that answer. I had to work that day, and I was already there, so I stayed. I figured I was overreacting anyway. During the day, everything felt normal. I was at the supermarket from early morning to almost evening. By the time I got back to the motel, it was dark again. I parked directly under the brightest light and carried all my tools inside at once so I wouldn't have to go back out. The woman at the desk saw me and asked if I was okay. I told her I hadn't slept. She hesitated for a second, and then said if I wanted she could move me to a room near the office. I asked why she hadn't offered that the night before. She said she didn't think it was necessary. Then she added something I've thought about a couple times since. She said it usually doesn't happen 2 nights in a row. I asked what that meant, and she immediately acted like she'd misspoken. She just said the drifters normally move on. That made me more uneasy than I already was. I seriously thought about packing up and driving an hour to another hotel, but I was exhausted, filthy from work, and told myself I could just stay one more night and leave in the morning. Around 8 p.m., I got food and brought it back to my room. While I was eating, I heard a truck drive slowly through the lot. I looked through the curtain and saw the same dark green pickup from the night before. It drove past my room, turned around near the road, and parked at the very end of the lot with the lights off. I couldn't see who was inside. I called the office and told them. The owner answered this time, not the woman. He sounded irritated and told me if the truck wasn't blocking me in or damaging anything, there wasn't much he could do. I asked if he knew who it was and he just said, people come and go. I sat there for maybe an hour checking the window every few minutes. The truck never moved. Eventually, I turned off the TV and lights and tried to sleep with my clothes still on. Sometime after 11 o'clock, I heard someone walking outside again. Slow, super slow steps. Then a soft tap at the window, not the door. I stayed in the bed. Then another tap came, this time closer to the center of the glass. Then a fingernail or something dragged slowly down the window. I could hear it clearly. I had never felt fear like that because I knew the person was standing inches away from where I was lying, and they knew I was in there pretending to be asleep. I grabbed my phone and started dial ing 911. But before I hit call, I heard the bathroom window rattle. It was a tiny frosted window above the toilet. Then I heard something even worse. The sound of the room next to mine opening. Like an actual key or tool working the lock, and then the door opening. The room next to me had been empty when I checked in. I knew that because I had looked through the crack in the curtains the night before and never saw a car or lights there. I got out of bed and crouched near the wall that connected our rooms. I heard movement next door. Not the heavy footsteps of somebody checking into a room, more like somebody trying not to make a sound. I called 911 and whispered everything as quietly as I could. The dispatcher kept telling me to stay on the line. While I was talking, I heard one hard hit on the shared wall behind the headboard, like someone testing how solid it was. Then another lower down, and then just nothing. I was trying so hard to listen that I could hear my own breathing and heartbeat. Then I heard the bathroom window in my room start to move. It wasn't rattling this time. It was opening, but just a little. I ran to the bathroom and shoved it closed with both hands. Something on the other side pushed back once. Not that hard, but enough for me to feel it. I locked it even though the latch looked flimsy. Then I backed away. The dispatcher told me officers were minutes out. I could hear movement outside my front door now too, like there was more than one person. Then came the soft knocks on the door like the night before. I didn't answer. I grabbed the motel chair and jammed it under the doorknob, even though I knew that probably wouldn't do much. The police arrived, and as soon as headlights hit the curtains, I heard running. At least 2 sets of footsteps. The officers found that the screen on my bedroom window had been removed and was lying in the bushes. They also found fresh pry marks on my truck door and on the door of the empty room next to mine. Later, the older officer asked me privately if I had anyone angry at me or if I had posted online that I was staying there. I said no. Then he told me they had seen the green pickup before. There had been 2 other incidents in the previous 6 months involving men staying alone at that same motel for work. In both cases, someone had tried getting into their vehicles during the night. One guy said he heard people outside his room but left before reporting anything else. The other woke up to his motel door cracked open even though he swore he had locked it. Nothing had been taken in either case. The officer said they believed the group was following out-of-town men from bars or work sites, then waiting until they were isolated and trying to get inside their rooms. He never said exactly what he thought the end goal was. He didn't need to. I packed my stuff while 2 officers stood outside. When I checked under the bed before leaving, which I normally never do, there was a folded piece of paper shoved almost against the wall. I only noticed it because I dropped my phone charger. It was part of a local newspaper torn into a square. On the back, somebody had written my room number and my truck plate in pen. That meant whoever it was hadn't just picked me at random that night. They had been watching long enough to write things down. I left the motel before 1 o'clock in the morning and drove almost 2 hours home. Even though I had 1 more day of work scheduled, my company sent someone else the next week, and I found out later he stayed in a different town. Besides telling the story, I try to put the experience behind me. This story started in October 2025. I was single and decided to download Tinder to see if I could find a potential partner. After a few swipes, I got a match. Killian liked you back. I started smiling and opened with, "Hey, what's up?" He responded quickly, and we started talking all day every day. He was in the military at a base not too far away. Eventually, after a few weeks of talking, he became possessive. He would say things like, "You're mine. If I can't have you, no one can. And if you block or unfriend me, I'll kill you." We never even started dating. One day in December, he unfriended me on Snapchat. I didn't think too much of it. I moved on. Then a few days ago, he added me again. Remembering the threats, I added him back out of fear. He sent a snap saying he had been thinking about me for weeks. I responded carefully, not wanting to upset him. He started acting like a controlling boyfriend, constantly asking where I was and who I was with. He wanted me to turn on my Snapchat map so he could track me. I refused. One night last week, I was out with a friend until about 1 a.m. When I got dropped off, I walked up the alleyway to my house. I saw a man standing there. At first, I didn't think much of it. Then he called my name. I asked who it was. Then I saw his face. It was him. Before I could react, he grabbed my neck and slammed my head into the wall. He started interrogating me, asking who I was with and why I was out so late. He choked me so hard I couldn't breathe. I thought I was going to die. He threw me to the ground, slapped me, then started choking me again. I could feel myself fading. I remember looking up at the sky and thinking about my dog. Then suddenly, he stopped. He said he had to go or he'd miss the last bus. And just like that, he ran. I lay there unable to speak. When I tried to call my friend, no sound came out. My voice was gone. My friend came, took me in, and called the police. The next day, I gave my statement. The police said I was in danger. They gave me an emergency alarm and tracking device. A few days later, I was followed by someone connected to him. The police told me his intention was to kill me. Now, every time I go outside, I feel like I'm being watched. One day, I might not see him coming. My name is Mike, and this happened last October when I decided to take a solo camping trip in the Smoky Mountains. I had been feeling burnt out from work and just wanted a couple of quiet days away. On the way there, I stopped at a roadside diner. While eating, I noticed a man a few stools down watching me. He asked where I was headed. When I told him I was camping alone, he just said, "Be careful. It gets real quiet out there at night." I brushed it off. By late afternoon, I reached a trailhead with no other cars. I liked the idea of being alone. I hiked in and set up camp just before dark. At first, everything felt peaceful. Then I heard footsteps. Human footsteps. I looked up and saw a man standing in the trees watching me. He stepped closer and asked if I was alone. I lied and said friends were coming. He nodded and walked away. But before disappearing, he stopped and looked back at me from the darkness. That night, I heard footsteps circling my tent. Then breathing right outside. I stayed completely still, pretending to be asleep. The footsteps came and went for hours. At some point, I was sure there was more than one person. When morning came, I packed as fast as I could. As I stepped out of the tent, I heard multiple people running away through the woods. I hadn't imagined it. I rushed back to my car. Later, I went back to retrieve my gear. Everything was gone. My tent, sleeping bag, supplies, everything. Like I had never been there. I didn't look for it. I just left. I haven't gone camping alone since. Sometimes I still think about how many people were out there that night. And how close they were while I lay there pretending to sleep.